Tuesday morning started just like any other for me, or so I thought. I rolled out of bed at 5:45 a.m., right on schedule, with that awful digital beep drilling straight into my half-dreaming brain. As much as I hated that sound, I never once hit snooze. That just wasn't me. I lived by responsibility, wore it like a second skin. Next to me, Sienna slept soundly, her hair fanned out across the pillow like a painting. She didn't stir when I leaned down and brushed a kiss against her forehead. Maybe she woke up for a second, maybe not. Either way, she gave no sign. I pulled myself out of bed, stretching a little, and headed for the kitchen, already picturing that first hot cup of coffee. Coffee in hand, I set out for work, mentally gearing up to tackle another day as a mid-level manager, 7 steady years of loyalty and late nights under my belt. If you'd asked me that morning whether I'd be packing up my desk by lunchtime, I would have laughed you right out of the room. I mean, my performance reviews were always solid gold. I didn't just meet expectations, I crushed them. I stayed late. I worked weekends without complaint. Every extra project they tossed my way, I took it on like a badge of honor. That's who I was, the guy who could be counted on, no matter what. But by 10 a.m., that version of my life would be nothing but ashes at my feet. "Come on in," Chase said from behind that massive wooden desk of his. He was my boss, the kind of man who always wore his hair slicked back and smiled like he knew a secret about you he wasn't telling. Still, I had never thought of him as the kind of guy who'd stab you in the gut with a smile. Not until that morning. He let out a long sigh, clasped his hands, and gave me the company line. "Budget cuts. Restructuring. It's not personal," he said. He even threw in a compliment, told me I'd been an asset. That the decision came from the board, not him. As he talked, I sat there feeling like the floor under me had just given way. Everything I built my identity on, being the reliable provider, the husband, the dad who always delivered, started crumbling right then and there. Chase kept droning on. 3 months severance, extended health coverage. "Wish it didn't have to be this way," he said, like he actually meant it. Maybe he did. Maybe it was all just corporate theater. Either way, I felt like I was floating outside of myself. I signed whatever papers they shoved at me without really reading them and stumbled out the door. But inside, everything had changed. I felt like I had been shoved into some strange play, handed a script I hadn't rehearsed, forced into a role I never asked for. I sat in my car in the underground garage for 20 straight minutes, not crying, not raging, just quietly trying to rewire who I was supposed to be now. And somehow, in all that chaos, a strange kind of calm washed over me. I made a decision. I wasn't going to dump this news on Sienna right away. Instead, I'd remind her we were still in this together. I drove to Trader Joe's and grabbed everything I needed to make her favorite pasta dinner. On a whim, I even splurged on a fancy bottle of red and a $70 bouquet of lilies and hydrangeas, probably not the smartest move considering my situation, but in my mind, it was a message: I'm still the man you married. I'm still standing. When I got home, I cooked like my life depended on it. I made fresh tomato sauce simmered low with garlic and basil, hand-cut noodles, a bright salad tossed in homemade dressing. By the time Sienna walked through the door around 5:30 p.m. with our daughter Harper trailing behind her, everything was ready. Harper, 10 years old, quiet but always sharp, usually gave me a little smile when she came in. Tonight, she just stood there, wide-eyed, picking up on a tension I hadn't even realized was thick in the air. "What's all this?" Sienna asked, cocking a hip and giving me a look. Suddenly, I felt ridiculous standing there with an apron on. "I thought I'd surprise you," I said, trying to keep my voice upbeat. "Something happened at work, but let's eat first." Her eyes narrowed like a hawk spotting a mouse. "No. Tell me now," she snapped. "You never pull stunts like this on a random Tuesday." I gave Harper a quick glance, trying to keep it light for her sake. "Later," I said, trying to smile. "No," Sienna barked. "Now." So I swallowed the lump in my throat and told her the truth, that I'd been let go, but it wasn't the end of the world. I had a severance package. I had plans. We had savings. We'd get through this. That's what I said out loud anyway. Sienna stared at me for a moment, then glanced down at the flowers I was still holding like an idiot. She let out a sharp, humorless snort. "A guilt gift from an unemployed clown," she said loud enough for Harper to hear. The words hit like a slap. Harper's mouth dropped open a little, stunned silent. But Sienna wasn't finished. She snatched the bouquet from my hands, marched into the kitchen, and dumped them right into the sink, water splashing everywhere. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear her next words. "See, Harper? That's what a failure looks like," she said, turning to our daughter, who looked at me then like she was seeing me through a whole new lens, and not in a good way. I stood there frozen, forcing a small, weak smile just to keep the peace. Part of me was too stunned to speak, and the other part didn't want to start a scene in front of Harper. Later that night, after she'd tucked Harper into bed, Sienna unleashed hell on me. She ranted for nearly an hour about mortgages, about losing her social standing, about how the Aspen trip she had been planning for months would now be a humiliating cancellation. Not once did she stop to ask if I was okay. Eventually, I gave up trying to be strong and migrated to the couch, still feeling the sting of every cruel word she had hurled at me. As I lay there staring blankly at the ceiling, the truth hit me hard. I had ignored 1,000 red flags, all in the name of love. Looking back, it was so obvious. Sienna had always been obsessed with appearances, always desperate to impress her army of shallow friends. And yet, I married her. I built a whole life with her. I brought a child into the world with a woman who seemed to see me as nothing more than a walking wallet. The next morning, she went about her life like I didn't even exist, off to Pilates, without so much as a glance in my direction. That was the moment I decided to dig deeper into our finances. What I found made my stomach turn. Sienna had opened a secret credit card 6 months earlier and racked up over $15,000 in charges on luxury goods, spa weekends, and other nonsense. On top of that, a $22,000 personal loan. Where did that money go? Designer handbags? Botox? A hidden savings account for her new life? I had no idea. All I knew was the betrayal cut just as deep, if not deeper, than losing my job. Later that day, as I cooked dinner, I overheard her talking on the phone with her friend Rhonda, whining about how my unemployment was ruining the family's reputation. That's when it truly hit me. We weren't partners. We weren't even friends. We were just two strangers cohabiting out of habit, and apparently the countdown on our marriage had started long before I even knew I was in trouble. But the worst of it, the part that would shatter me, hadn't come to light yet. 3 days after I lost my job, I was still trying to be civil. I told Sienna about every job I applied to, every lead I chased down. She barely acknowledged me, rolling her eyes like I was just some pathetic annoyance. That night, I found myself sleeping on the couch again. Harper had supposedly gone to bed. The house was dark, quiet, at least, until I heard whispered voices. I strained to listen. It was Sienna whispering to someone. Then I heard Harper's small voice. "Mom, when are we moving in with my real daddy?" she whispered. My whole body stiffened. I couldn't breathe. "Real daddy? I don't want to live with this clown," Harper whispered again, her voice trembling. "I'm scared of clowns. I hate clowns." My heart raced so fast I thought it might stop. What was happening? What was she talking about? "Sure," Sienna soothed. "Just a little longer. Once I deal with the finances, we'll be with Chase for good." Chase? My boss. My ex-boss. The man who fired me 3 days ago. That Chase? I nearly bolted upright right then and there, ready to explode, but something told me to stay still. Stay quiet. Let them talk. So I lay there, breathing slow, barely moving, letting the darkness cover me like a shroud. The conversation didn't last long, but it destroyed whatever was left of the life I thought I had. Harper, the daughter I loved more than anything, was calling another man her real daddy. And Sienna? She was plotting our escape, finalizing plans to leave me and move straight into a new life with Chase. My mouth went dry. My hands trembled uncontrollably. But I didn't make a sound. I just listened. Soon after, I heard Sienna leading Harper back to her room, the soft tread of her heels fading down the hall, and then the master bedroom door clicking shut. I lay there in the dark, my stomach twisted into painful knots, barely able to breathe. It wasn't just that my wife had been cheating on me with my boss. No, it was the horrifying realization that Harper might not even be my biological daughter. I didn't sleep at all that night. I couldn't. My mind played back every interaction, every party, every casual joke Chase had ever made. The way he hovered near Sienna at company events. The way she used to laugh too hard at his jokes. The glances they thought I was too naive to notice. I had written it all off at the time as harmless flirting, just Chase being his usual cocky self. But now? Now I knew better. By the time the sun rose, my mind was made up. If they thought I was just some gullible clown they could laugh off and discard, they were about to learn that even clowns have teeth. I got dressed in silence, grabbed my keys, and slipped out of the house before either of them could notice. The first thing I did was call an attorney I'd met years ago when I needed advice about estate planning. Her name was Margaret Bennett, and she had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in high-stakes divorces. "We can squeeze you in at 9:30, her assistant said after I explained I needed an urgent consultation. Perfect. The drive across town felt like moving through water. Everything around me looked surreal, too bright, too loud, too wrong. Margaret greeted me with a firm handshake and led me into her office, wasting no time. I laid it all out, every bitter, humiliating detail. The job loss. The affair. The whispers in the night. Her eyebrows shot up when I mentioned Chase's name. Chase Parker? She asked, tapping her pen against a thick notepad. Isn't he the CEO of your company? I nodded grimly. Yeah, him. I didn't hold back. I told her I wanted to pursue everything: alienation of affection, paternity fraud, anything and everything that could bring them down legally. Margaret nodded, flipping through a heavy binder of legal statutes, highlighting a few passages as she spoke. Alienation of affection is still recognized in a few states, she said. But we'll need proof, a real proof, that the affair directly damaged your marriage. And if you want to pursue paternity fraud, she continued, we'll need DNA testing for your daughter along with solid documentation, texts, photos, anything that shows the relationship between your wife and Mr. Parker. I leaned in, voice low but steady. Then I'll hire a private investigator. I wasn't just out for revenge anymore. I was hunting the truth, no matter how ugly it turned out to be. She was planning to leave me the second she locked down the money. I didn't have to guess, I heard it straight from her lips. Margaret's eyes never flinched. Then move fast, she said firmly. The second you've got your evidence, we'll start the lawsuits. But know this, once the papers fly, it could turn ugly. She didn't sugarcoat it. If Sienna and Chase decided to drag me through court just to bleed me dry with legal fees, it was going to be a war. I tightened my jaw and gave a stiff nod. I'm ready. I want them both to pay for what they've done. Margaret handed me a thick folder full of forms, instructions for filing for divorce, a guide on arranging a paternity test without tipping Sienna off. She even slid across a business card with a name on it, a private investigator she trusted. I wrote the retainer check, handed it over, and walked out of her office with a strange sense of grim satisfaction growing in my chest. If Sienna and Chase thought they could toss me aside without a fight, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. That same afternoon, I called the investigator, a guy named Carl Donovan. Ex-military, late 40s, the kind of man who probably didn't scare easily. His voice was gravelly but calm as he listened to my story. Do you think they meet up in person often? Carl asked bluntly. I didn't even hesitate. Yeah, probably at his office or sneaking around random hotels, I said, my bitterness barely contained. Carl jotted a few quick notes. All right, I'll start by tailing her, tracking her habits. If they're as careless as you think, we'll catch them red-handed real soon. I handed over everything I had: photos of Sienna, her car details, her Pilates schedule, her spa days, her whole shiny, shallow routine. Carl gave a nod. I'll be in touch the second I have something. Turned out he didn't need much time. Exactly 1 week later, on a random Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Carl. Got them. Check your email for photos. His next message hit even harder. They're at a Marriott right now. You're not gonna want to see it. Sorry, man. My hands shook as I opened my inbox. My stomach twisted into knots. And there it was. Photo after photo, Sienna in Chase's car, practically folded over him in the driver's seat, doing things I could barely even look at. And Chase, grinning through the half-open window like he just won the lottery. They had parked behind the hotel, probably thinking no one would ever find them there. For a second, I thought I might actually be sick. The betrayal tasted like acid in my mouth. But the anger burned hotter. It drowned everything else. I forwarded the pictures to Margaret with a simple message: let's move forward. I didn't confront Sienna, not yet. I kept playing dumb at home, kept pretending I was still chasing down job leads, smiling through gritted teeth. Because I wasn't just aiming for a clean divorce anymore. I was setting the stage for a complete and total reckoning. In my state, the old laws still allowed a man to sue for alienation of affection, and if I could prove the affair started before my firing, Chase could be looking at a very public scandal. And if Harper wasn't even my biological daughter, Chase's empire could crumble faster than they ever saw coming. But through it all, Harper was the one name that kept me awake at night. She was just a kid. No matter what DNA said, no matter whose blood ran through her veins, I had loved her like my own from the moment she was born. Even with the awful things she'd said, things Sienna probably fed her, I knew kids were easily swayed by the adults around them. Still, I needed the truth. I ordered a discreet DNA testing kit, one that didn't require a big scene. One quiet night after Harper had fallen asleep, I carefully took a swab from her toothbrush, following the instructions to the letter. Then I swabbed my own cheek, sealed the envelopes, and mailed them off. The days waiting for the results dragged like an endless storm cloud hanging over my head. But somehow I kept up the charade at home, pretending everything was fine. 2 weeks later, the email landed in my inbox. 0% probability of paternity. Harper wasn't biologically mine. The news hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken in my life. It felt like an enormous steel door had slammed shut in my chest, locking away whatever was left of the man I used to be. Everything Sienna had built, everything she had promised, every sweet lie, it was all rotten from the very start. If she had been sleeping with Chase since before Harper was born, then the betrayal ran deeper than anything I could have ever imagined. That same day, I met with Margaret again. She looked over the DNA results carefully and nodded. "This strengthens your paternity fraud case significantly," she said. "You have no legal obligation to support Harper anymore." "But emotionally," she added, her voice softer now, "that's a choice you'll have to make for yourself." "I don't know," I said quietly. "I'm furious, but she's still my daughter in here," I added, tapping a fist lightly against my chest. Margaret nodded solemnly. "Think it through. It's about to get messy." I left her office with a heavy heart but a clear mind. Sienna had sown the seeds of destruction with her own hands, now she was going to choke on the harvest. While quietly working with my old friend Russell to build a new consulting firm, one last lifeline in a sea of betrayal, I kept preparing for the final battle. Margaret had already drawn up the paternity fraud suit, demanding full compensation for every dollar I spent raising Harper. And the alienation of affection suit? That was aimed squarely at Chase's smug face. But it wasn't enough for me to do this behind closed doors. No, their lies deserved a public execution. I wasn't just after a quiet divorce anymore, I wanted to burn Chase's precious reputation to the ground. I wanted Sienna to watch her golden ticket derail right in front of her eyes. Mercy was no longer an option. Through Carl, my private investigator, I found out Sienna was spending more and more time at Chase's office, probably plotting whatever came next. So I decided to take the fight straight to their doorstep. I made a few calls and hired 2 private security guys from a well-known firm that specialized in personal protection. If Chase tried to call building security on me, I wanted a standoff. A scene. Something big enough that no one would be able to pretend it hadn't happened. Either way, I was ready. It was a Thursday afternoon, the sky heavy and gray, threatening rain. I pulled up outside Chase's downtown glass tower with my 2 new bodyguards, Derek and Trey. Both were big, serious men in plain black suits. They knew the plan. Step 1. Serve Sienna with divorce papers, paternity fraud papers, and the lawsuit notice. Step 2. Make sure Chase got served too. But the real showstopper? I had something even bigger ready to drop. Carl had dug up something delicious. Turns out Chase wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He'd also been caught sneaking around with the wife of one of the company's accountants, a guy named Cole, a guy built like a damn linebacker. Carl had the evidence, grainy but clear photos of Chase cozying up to Cole's wife at a hotel bar and then slipping upstairs together. So I sent Cole an anonymous message. "Show up at your boss's office at 4 p.m. tomorrow if you want to see the truth." I attached a short video clip, just enough to light a fire under him. It worked. By 3:55 p.m. I was in the lobby, heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs would crack. Derek, Trey, and I stepped into the elevator. I punched the button for the 20th floor. The security guards at the front desk watched us, but I still had my old visitor's badge from before Chase kicked me out. No one questioned a thing. Not yet. When the doors slid open, the first thing I saw was Sienna standing at the reception desk. She looked like she was dressed for a magazine shoot, pencil skirt, fitted blouse, those heels that made her legs look even longer. Her hair curled in soft, perfect waves. Her makeup flawless. She hadn't bothered looking like that for me in years. At first, she smiled until she recognized me. Then her face went stiff and pale. "Michael, what are you doing here?" she stammered, backing up a step. I smiled pleasantly. "Came to see Chase." "Is he in?" She glanced uneasily at the 2 towering men behind me. He's in a meeting." "I'll wait," I said, my tone cheerful enough to make it clear I wasn't giving her a choice. The receptionist sat frozen behind the desk, clearly terrified to get involved. A few employees peeked out from their cubicles, sensing something bad was about to happen. And they were right. Right on cue, Cole came barreling out of the elevator behind us. The guy looked like he could crush a cinder block with his bare hands, 6'3" and pure fury. He stormed straight up to us, breathing hard, his fists clenched. "Where's he?" Cole barked. "I will kill him." Sienna's head snapped between me and Cole, pure panic lighting up her face. Wait, what's happening?" she stammered. I gave her a cold, almost pitying look. "Go ahead, Sienna," I said, voice low and razor sharp. "Tell him where Chase is, or should I?" She opened her mouth, shut it again, visibly floundering. Finally, she blurted out, "He's in the conference room, but please, let me get him for you." "I bet you'd love to get him," I snapped, my voice dripping with venom. "Just like you got him in the Marriott parking lot." Her face turned a furious shade of red, a cocktail of shame and rage. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she started. Without missing a beat, I pulled out my phone, tapped a few times, and shoved the screen in front of her. There, clear as day, was the photo, her head buried in Chase's lap. She gasped, stumbling back a step, her face draining of all color. Around us, you could hear the muffled gasps of a few employees who had caught a glimpse. The receptionist clapped a hand over her mouth. The tension was like a coiled spring, ready to snap. "You think I didn't know?" I whispered harshly. "I've been collecting receipts, Sienna." Before she could answer, Cole let out a roar. "Where I asked Parker?" Without waiting for a response, he barreled down the hall toward the conference rooms, shoving past anyone who got in his way. Sienna tried to follow, desperate to fix whatever she could. And I followed her calmly, purposefully, with my 2 guards right behind me. We reached the glass-walled conference room just in time to see Cole slam the door open so hard it bounced off the wall. Inside, Chase sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 board members and the HR director. All heads turned at the commotion. "Jesus, Cole? What the hell are you doing?" Chase shouted, standing up in alarm. And then he saw me. For a brief second, fear flashed across his face. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice shaky. I couldn't help it, I smiled. A slow, cold smile. "We've got unfinished business, Chase. Personal business." Sienna tried to salvage the situation, plastering on a fake calm. "Let's talk about this privately," she urged, glancing nervously at the board members who already looked horrified. "No," I said, raising my voice so it echoed off the glass. "We're doing this right here. In front of everyone." I turned and pointed at Chase. Because this man thought he could fire me, steal my wife, wreck my life, and walk away clean. Chase's face drained of color, his lips twitching in panic. "This is insane," he barked. "Some kind of joke?" I stepped forward, my voice low but deadly certain. "It's not a joke. I have proof, years of it, that you've been screwing my wife behind my back. And you know what else I found out?" I said, stepping closer to the conference table. "My daughter, Harper? Yeah, turns out biologically she's not mine. She's yours." I tossed a sealed envelope across the polished table. It slid to a stop right in front of Chase. "Go ahead. Deny it," I added, my voice low and cutting. "DNA results. 0% chance she's mine." A stunned gasp slipped from the HR director's mouth. One of the board members pushed back from the table, staring at me, then at Chase, his face pale. The second board member leaned over and whispered something to the first, both looking thoroughly horrified. Cole wasn't about to be left out. He stormed forward, phone already in hand. "You filthy piece of trash," he growled at Chase. He jabbed the screen and played a video, grainy footage, sure, but unmistakable. Chase, arm in arm with Cole's wife, walking into a hotel room. "You see, Sienna," I said with a cold smirk, "he wasn't just cheating with you." Sienna whipped her head around, glaring at Chase with pure venom. "How could you?" she hissed. "You said you loved me. You said we were going to start fresh once I left Michael." Chase raised his hands like a man cornered by a firing squad, stammering nonsense. I don't know what any of you are talking about. This is slander." "Slander," I repeated, laughing, sharp and bitter. "You can explain that to my attorney." I turned to Derek and Trey, giving them a slight nod. Derek stepped forward, calm as a machine. "Chase Parker," he said, holding out a thick stack of documents, "you're being served with a lawsuit for alienation of affection, among other claims." Chase stared blankly as Derek set the papers in front of him. Trey turned next, facing Sienna. "Sienna Parker," he said, his voice just as cool, "you're being served with divorce papers and a lawsuit for paternity fraud." She didn't move to take them, so Trey simply dropped them onto the table with a heavy thud. Sienna's face crumpled, tears spilling over as she reached for me. "Michael, please, let's talk about this." "Talk?" I snapped, feeling the last shred of patience burn away. "Sure, let's talk. Let's talk about how you called me an unemployed clown to our daughter. How you planned to drain our joint account and run off with Chase. How you laughed at me, humiliated me, and never once cared if I was okay." I shook my head, disgusted. "I was done with you the second you threw those flowers in the sink and called me a failure in front of Harper. But this is the nail in the coffin." Chase, finally finding his backbone, snarled, "I'll call building security. You're trespassing. You're harassing my employees." I smirked. "They're with me," I said, gesturing to Derek and Trey. "But sure, Chase. Call for backup. I'm sure they'll love seeing what you've been up to." Chase yanked out his phone. But Cole was faster. He grabbed Chase by the collar and slammed him back against the glass wall. The entire conference room shook with the impact. One of the board members bolted out the door, probably running for real security. You wrecked my marriage too, Cole hissed, his teeth gritted in rage. Without warning, he slapped Chase across the face hard enough that Chase's head snapped sideways, leaving a bright red handprint blooming on his cheek. And you fired Michael after screwing his wife? Cole roared. Chase tried to scuttle away, but Cole wasn't done. He shoved Chase to the floor like he weighed nothing, then landed a punch right to his jaw. Blood pooled at the corner of Chase's mouth. One of the board members shouted for someone to stop this. The HR director looked on, frozen like a deer in headlights. I crouched low beside Chase's broken form, lowering my voice to a razor's edge. This is just the beginning, I whispered. I'm going to drown you in lawsuits. I'm going to torch your reputation. I leaned even closer. I've already lined up a deal with one of your biggest competitors. And guess what? They can't wait to watch you crash and burn. Sienna ran forward, sobbing now. Michael, please, she cried. Don't do this. We can fix it, eh? Fix it. I barked, stepping back from Chase. You've already taken everything, Sienna. But the money in our account? Half of it's mine, and I'm coming for every last penny. I jabbed a finger at her. And that fancy lifestyle you love so much? It ends today. Chase tried to sit up, blood trickling from his mouth. You bastard, he coughed. You can't pin this all on me. You were a failure at your job. That's why I fired you. Sienna hated you for years. I laughed a cold, hollow sound. You two deserve each other, I said. Rot together for all I care. I turned to Chase, my voice dropping. And when you're sitting alone with nothing but your regrets, remember this all started because you couldn't keep your hands to yourself. Cole, still fueled by rage, grabbed Chase's phone and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall with a loud crack, pieces shattering everywhere. The HR director gasped. One of the board members looked like he might faint. That was enough to finally stir building security into action. They came rushing into the conference room. But Derek and Trey were ready. They stepped between me and the guards, calmly explaining that we were there for legal service, that Cole's little incident was a separate matter. Security tried to push past them, but Derek and Trey were stone walls, firm, unyielding. I gave Cole a sharp nod. Let's go. He hesitated for one long, seething moment, towering over Chase's battered body. You're lucky, Cole muttered, voice dripping with hatred. Real lucky. And then he turned and stormed out. I followed close behind, not even glancing back. Behind us, the conference room buzzed with gasps, cries, and whispers, the wreckage of two lives tangled together and set ablaze. Sienna just stood there in the middle of the wreckage, tears pouring down her face. She reached out for me, desperation etched into every line of her face. Michael, she whispered, voice cracking, please, we can talk. I'm sorry. Please let me explain. I took a step back, out of her reach, my jaw tight with rage. I don't want your explanations, I snapped. I'll see you in court. Without another glance, I turned on my heel and walked away, Derek and Trey falling in step beside me like shadows. The elevator doors closed with a soft whisper behind us, sealing the chaos upstairs like a bad memory. I exhaled long and slow, feeling my heart hammering against my ribs, a hurricane of emotions still raging inside. And yet, beneath all that pain and fury, there was something else. A cold, steady sense of triumph. I knew the real war wasn't over. The courtroom battles still lay ahead. Papers, motions, hearings, the slow, brutal machinery of justice. But in that moment, I had gotten what I came for. I had seen the truth land like a bomb in that glass tower, had watched their smug faces crumble into dust. And that was worth everything. The next few months were brutal, a slog of legal warfare that tested every ounce of strength I had left. But one by one, I knocked them down. Chase couldn't survive the fallout. Under mounting pressure from the board and the very public disgrace of my lawsuit and the parade of affairs that followed, he resigned in shame. His polished, perfect reputation? Gone. Sienna faced her own reckoning. The court found her guilty of paternity fraud and ordered her to repay me a hefty sum, a refund for every year I spent unknowingly raising another man's child. And as for Harper, even though blood said she wasn't mine, my heart told a different story. I negotiated limited visitation rights. She was innocent in all of this. I wasn't going to punish her for the sins of her mother. Meanwhile, Cole finalized his divorce, cutting his own toxic ties clean, and later joined me as the lead accountant in my new business venture. Together, we built something stronger, something real, rising up from the ashes they left behind. When the final gavel struck and the dust settled, two things were crystal clear. Sienna and Chase had spun their lives out of lies and betrayal. And in the end, they paid for it in blood, in money, and in the hollow ruins of everything they thought they had won.